It's good to see all of you for a topic like this. I was not sure whether people will be interested. Thanks for your responses. And I'll do a quick recap of what we did in a couple of previous sessions on mindfulness so that we have some kind of a connectivity. So we saw in the beginning using mindfulness to manage ourselves better. So it's managing outside by mastering inside, being mindful and then doing mindful as an application into our work and life situations. And we learned some small techniques like breath watch, like a meditation. And then we looked at holistic mindfulness, that is managing through energy, body, mind, all together, because they're all very interrelated. And that's called yoga, which means union of body, mind, energy. And then we saw what's really human system beyond what we know as a physical entity, going a little deeper into the energy elements. So we looked at how from gross level to subtle level, we have our human system and how it works from a cause to effect, from inside out. And the chakras and nadis, which are like energy system, which are not understood in the modern physics or modern medicine, but that is part of the yogic sciences. And around that, we saw all the techniques or technologies that are built for holistic mindfulness. Malavika, have you enabled recording? You can just enable the recording.
Yeah, it is recording.
Okay. So we looked at all these asanas, pranayamas, meditation, mudra, using sound, all these things, how they come from this basic human anatomy of the energy systems, and then how it impacts the mind and the body. And today we'll go one step deeper. Many of you asked that, can we do a little deeper on this? And it really goes into a dimension of spirituality, what we typically call as. For this session, I would like you to have no expectation. Because when you have expectation, it works like a filter. Whatever matches that filter goes inside. If something doesn't match to that filter, we'll reject it. So I would request you to be very open. If you feel that it cannot be, then you just say, maybe, let me be open. So that's the only prerequisite for this session. Okay. So with that, in fact, before getting into that topic itself, I want to share a little bit about background from this perspective. Please don't mistake me or misunderstand me. It's not boasting or anything, but it's to make sure that you understand why I am saying what I'm saying. So when you talk about spiritual dimension, it is something more internal, very intrinsic. So this quest for exploring inner dimension, or what is really this life, those kind of questions really started to me happening in when I was about 12 years age. It got triggered when I read a book from Swami Vivekananda. Actually, my brother had that book and I just read that. I remember it was actually a book on Raja Yoga. And I was amazed that we are not really what we perceive we are. We are something more, something different. That was the thought process that got triggered. And since then, actually, I have been living kind of a two parallel life. One is, the social, family, professional, all those dimensions. Another one is my own secret life inside, actually, which was always kind of seeking, questioning, looking for something which is something more than this. And it was always saying that this is not it, this is not it. And these two paths merged about 13 years back. I had 2 years tremendous churn in myself about what's the real purpose of life, what's the most worthwhile thing to do in life, that kind of questions. Then it dawned to me that these two tracks are not different, they're actually one and the same. So I'll talk a little bit about that experiences. So as I said, from then somehow I landed in Ramakrishna Ashram during my first and second PUC, that is 11th and 12th standard. I say somehow I landed because it was not my effort. So I'm a student from there. There is a hostel in Bangalore, Ramakrishna Ashram. And those 2 years actually gave a lot of impetus to my life, which is actually phenomenally impacted, and it continues to be even today. And then during my engineering days, I practiced something called Sahaja Marg, which is from a person called Ramchandraji. He's from UP. It is a meditation technique based on Raj Yoga, so I can practice that for many years. Then while I was in Motorola, they introduced transcendental meditation. Again, I practiced this for many years. In fact, all these things have been very useful for me. They were not like window shopping, hopping from one place to another, but I saw they were like steps in my evolution. And I practiced many of art of living practices for several years, maybe about 7-8 years. In fact, I did all the programs of art of living other than teachers training. And then somehow I got connected to Isha. I again practiced many Isha yoga techniques, again very profound and in my journey. And more recently, I've been connected with Sri M. Some of you know. Otherwise, you can Google, another phenomenal yogi. And another person called Suresh Ramaswamy. I'll talk about him a little bit towards the end. He's a Bangalorean based in California. He's a technocrat. He's entrepreneur, created many companies and sold to biggies. But most importantly, he's a enlightened, being, I would say. And he's also life coach for many CXOs in US. And he has written some books. I will talk about that. Somehow, luckily, I have been getting connected to many of kind of yogis. Some are known, some are not so known. For example, there is one fully enlightened person in Karnataka. He's a simple farmer. Other than his wife, daughter, and another friend of mine, nobody else knows that. And he says, if I talk about these, people think I have gone mad. So he's very quiet, but he's profound and he guides in so many ways. So this is kind of a quick background. And through this process, I have gone through certain personal experiences, which many yogis have written. And I have absolutely no doubt in my mind about their experiences, what they have written. Because I've personally seen many of that glimpses. I'm not a superstitious person. I'm a very scientific person, so to say. I also follow modern science, like Scientific American. And they have, for example, Scientific American Mind as a separate branch. Curious to know what's happening in those fields. But they study mostly the brain and nervous system and psychology, not mind, because they don't know what's mind actually. So this is a kind of a quick background about why I'm going to say certain things today. So let's get started with this. I want to take an analogy of virtual reality. Have you experienced virtual reality? We all have experienced actually. For example, TVs, movies in a theater. We see as if it is so real. We laugh and cry and have all the emotions. And when we come out, we know that it was just a movie. And there are virtual reality gadgets now. We can wear that and have a very different experience. And there is something called sixth sensor. These are some devices which actually feed signals to brain directly. They tap the radio electromagnetic waves and then feed the signal directly to the brains. So we can get various experiences through that. But they are all like, virtual reality. In fact, I'll be sharing this presentation later. You can look at a lot of links I have given in this. This is one of the links of a virtual reality gadget. For example, here this person is playing table tennis in this actually. He gets a table tennis bat in his hand. He gets a room and a table tennis table there, and the ball pops up there. Then he starts playing it. And you can change the games. You can have a boxing game with this person. So this is really virtual reality, right? We know it's not real, but when you are wearing it and if you look at inside, it looks so real actually. And it's fun, it's nice game. But imagine if you are stuck with that virtual reality gadget, because you don't see anything else outside world. You see whatever is, projected in that device. But you know that outside world, there is a lot more things, right? Now, also imagine if this virtual reality gadget was fitted in right from birth, then we wouldn't have seen anything else other than what is projected from that virtual reality gadget, isn't it? In fact, this is exactly the situation with us. In fact, our body and mind are actually virtual reality gadgets. With modern science now, we have a lot of evidences of that. Now look at how things happen to us. Whatever we perceive as this world, which we feel it's a real world, is actually a filtered world through these 5 sensors. We know what we see has a spectrum of, the rainbow colors, the white light, right? We don't know what, you cannot perceive infrared or ultraviolet. Our spectrum is limited there. Whereas we know that some other animals can perceive even beyond that. We can't see in the night. A lot of animals can see in night. What you hear is a very narrow band, 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. But we know dogs can hear much higher frequency. We know bats can hear much more than what we hear. What we smell, very limited. Dogs can sniff better than us. Similarly, taste, touch. So through these 5 sensors, we are getting a filtered view of this existence actually. And through modern science, we know that world has much bigger spectrum. For example, there is so much of electromagnetic wave which you cannot perceive. See, right now, as you're sitting here, all the electromagnetic waves are here. All the TV channels, all the radio channels, all the mobile calls, all the internet signals, everything is here actually. But it's not in our perception because our sensors cannot perceive that. We need an instrument. That means this is our virtual reality gadget, which is actually filtering the existence and giving us a view of that. And what happens then? It comes to our brain, because these are connected through nervous system to the brain, and we keep accumulating a lot of data through these sensors, and then keep processing that data. Our whole thinking process is actually analyzing that data, projecting that data, or creating more data, and creating a lot of software. When I say software, the logic. We say, oh, this is good, this is bad, I like this, I hate this, this is right, this is wrong. Those are all software actually we are building. This kind of a logic we are building in our head. So this works are similar to like a computer. We have memory, CPU. And as we build and collect this more data and more software, we keep filtering this even more. For example, children have much more photographic view. They see everything. As we grow up, we start seeing very selectively, right? Even if there is so many things happening, we won't notice it because we gather so much data, we keep on processing and we keep filtering out even more actually. And this is what is happening with us in terms of how we perceive this world. And this is, in a sense, our virtual reality gadget. And I'll show you some more proofs of this. Now, just like that other gadget I showed, if you know that there is a lot more things in the existence, and if I come out of this virtual reality gadget, then I can experience this existence fully, right? That is what is actually we are trying to explore. Now I'll take one more example. See, we look at, say, some red cube. Is it really a red cube? If you analyze what is really happening is there is a white light falling in this, and it absorbs all other spectrum and emits red spectrum. That comes and falls on the retina, which is just a screen. And from there, it gets converted to electrical signal, and signal goes to the brain. So if you notice here, this object is not going inside our eye. Object is not going into the brain. What is going inside here is light. Then what is going to the brain is electrical signal. Then in the brain, we interpret it and say, oh, this is red, this is cube. And we have given names to that, to the forms. Very important to analyze this. Now, one more thing to look at. Computer also has a camera. It also takes this light in. It also has a computer and CPU memory. It processes those, creates image. But do you think computer feels I am seeing? Don't think so, right? It's not animated. It's inanimate. Whereas we have a very personal feel as I am seeing it. So who is that I who is feeling that seeing? It's not the eye, because eye is just an instrument which is processing light and converting to electrical signals. Is it the brain? Brain is again just processing those electrical signals. So what is that? Something which says I am seeing. That is real I. All these other external peripherals are actually our virtual reality gadgets. In fact, you reflect one more thing. Our body has changed so much since we are born to now. Our mind keeps changing so much. It's so transitory, right? But since childhood to even now, we have something inside which we feel as that is I. This is I all the time, right? So it is that something which is real we. This is not a body or the mind which is we. That's what we want to explore a little bit more. And that's the first step in spirituality, to recognize that we are not actually this body and mind. We are body and mind belongs to us. If I say this pen belongs to me, the pen and me are separate, right? So we say intuitively, my body, my mind. That means me and body are different. Me and mind are different. That means I am something different than this body and mind. You look at another analogy, we say a car is going. A car went and hit something. It's not the car, right? There is a driver inside. Very similar to that. Actually, we are a resident in this body and mind complex, we can say. That's the first step in spirituality, to understand that we are beyond this body and mind. But look at this, why we don't feel that way. In modern science, we know that at an atomic level, everything is same. Everything is just electrons, protons, neutrons, right? But we don't feel that way. We see different kinds of objects because that's how our sensors project it. But also, why we don't experience this existence as one unique thing, and we have this VR gadget and we are beyond that? Why don't we experience that? That's because everybody has similar VR gadget, body-mind gadget. So we feel it's a universal truth. And from birth to death, we have fitted with this VR gadget. We haven't seen anything beyond this. Moment we are born, it's there. And we see the world through that filtered gadget. So we think that this is all. There is nothing more in this existence. But that is what's called Maya in Indian systems. It's a grand illusion. It looks like that, but it is not really like that. Because we know even through modern science, even if you say this is a solid cube, we know this is completely hollow. Because at an atomic level, 99% is hollow space. There are small electrons, proton, neutrons, but it looks to be a solid object. That is called Maya. It's an illusion created by this body-mind virtual reality gadget. So I would like to play a video now, because if yogis say we don't believe, if scientists say we believe. So this is from a scientist's own experience. She is a neuroscientist in US. It's a TED talk. I have given links, and this video I have edited a little bit to shorten it, but gist remains the same. She went through her own stroke. She had a damage in left brain and went through stroke. While going through the stroke, she observed what's happening in her brain actually. And she took 8 years to come out of that, and then wrote a book, and this is the TED talk she is talking about. So I just want you to listen to this. Okay. So that's an experience from a neuroscientist studying the brain. In a sense, she actually dismantled her virtual reality, and she could experience the existence in full. So in Indian system, if you look at this whole anatomy of human system, they classify in panchakoshas, 5 layers. The outermost is physical, then the mental, then energy body, etheric body, bliss body, or annamaya kosha, pranamaya kosha, or manonmaya kosha, pranamaya kosha, etc. So this outer body is called gross body, and this is subtle body, and this is causal body. And beyond that is, you can say, we, or the consciousness. So it goes from a gross to subtle, and the external world gets filtered through these layers, we can say. So if you look at what happens when we die, because if you understand death, you can understand life. So when we say die in Indian system, it's actually we disconnect the physical mental body and or our gross body. Actually, death doesn't mean we don't exist. We just change the body and mind. And in the modern science now, a lot more evidence is coming through that. So this is actually our part of the VR gadget. I'm just taking that analogy so that we can kind of relate to it. So if you look at birth in yogic system, because these all give the input about we are not the body and mind, we are beyond that. So in yogic system, the birth is looked at like this. It's a combination of genetic inheritance through sperm and egg, and you can say soul inheritance, a life force. You know, around the after conceiving, around 40 to 45 days, actually life enters that life force. In fact, now there is again another TED video. You can look at this. This is a visualization done by NASA from a conception, how the cells multiply and ultimately how the baby comes out. Up to that, they have done this visualization. There you can notice around 40 to 45 days, that is when the heart starts beating in the fetus. Until then, it's just a flesh of mass, part of the mother's womb. Then something changes. A clock starts ticking. You know, in a computer, clock is the one which actually starts driving everything, right? If the clock stops, everything else stops. So this heartbeat stops there. That means something enters there. So you can call it anything. It's kind of a life force. So a new life actually begins by then. That's why in all civilizations or even religions, you can see that abortion after these days is considered equivalent to murder, and it's not encouraged because you are not allowing life force to emerge through that. Now, there is a part of biology called biology of transcendence. They are saying death is an illusion. I'm just giving you a lot of pointers. You can explore them. Another great book to read, this is from Sadhguru, on death. It's a phenomenal book on death, on everything on death. You know, what happens? Death is a process actually. It takes a while. It's not an instance. That's why there are 14 days of rituals. And what happens after death? Everything is described in this, the entire mechanics of death. Because if you understand death, we will understand life. And the source of fear is actually death, and it manifests in a lot of other forms in our life. So actually we can come out of this virtual reality gadget by understanding this. I would like to show you now one more video. Another person who died and came back. She died of cancer, but then came back, and then she's sharing that experience. You can watch. Okay, welcome back. So there are many things you can explore. Perspective on death by neuroscientists. There is another neuroscientist, Eben Alexander. He has written a book called Proof of Heaven, and his experience of that. He was in coma for a long time, came back, then his experiences like that. So important thing is that all these people accidentally saw that. They accidentally dismantled that VR gadget in a sense, and they experienced the full existence. But there is a method we can do that consciously in our own lives actually. And that is what Indian system has. In fact, entire yogic system is about transcending this body and mind limitation and experiencing who we really are actually. And there are many paths. If you take this, going to this top of the mountain as a goal or realizing yourself, again taking an analogy, you can use different paths depending on which part of the mountain you are, right? So if you use your body to achieve that ultimate, it's called karma yoga, you know, like selfless service. If you use your emotions, that's called bhakti yoga. You know, devotion is a very highest form of emotion. One thing is bhakti yoga in the recent days has become more of a, you know, praying for give me something. You know, it's a transaction. But bhakti is really surrendering. That means transcending this limitation of the small mind so that we are experiencing the big one. Jnana yoga, if you use your intellect, analyze, it's called viveka. That is jnana yoga. You say, actually, who am I? You know, I'm not this body, I'm not this mind. I am something witnessing these two. So who am I really? No, that path is jnana yoga. Kriya yoga, if you raise your energy through chakras, nadis, that energy system, and then brain perceives something beyond the nervous system. See, right now, these 5 sensors are a wired connection to the brain, right? Because nervous system is a wired connection. Whereas chakras and nadis are like a wireless connection to brain. So it opens up what Jill Bolte Taylor said. She experienced this enormous existence. She said she lost her experience of her boundaries of her bodies. She felt existence as one unified thing, right? That's what is actually experienced through going beyond this nervous system connection to the brain. So you can look at something like that. So that is Kriya Yoga, raising the energy. And to do all these things, there is a very systematic approach, Ashtanga Yoga. It starts with Yama, Niyama, like that, 8 steps. So that it's a very systematic, very scientific approach to go beyond this body, mind, virtual reality gadget and experience the real reality. So when you look at this goal on top of the mountain, what is the purpose or goal of life? In fact, I went through that churn, and When after 2 years, when I wrote it on a notebook, I wrote it something like, purpose of my life is to realize who am I and then help as many people as possible. And then, very strange coincidentally, I went to Ramakrishna Ashram one day and saw that their motto is Atmano Mokshartam Jagad Hitayacha. This is from Rigveda. And this is one sentence which defines what should be the purpose of life. What is the most worthwhile or ultimate purpose of life? Atmano Mokshartam is about self-realization or liberation or mukti. Jagad Hitaya is helping others. It's not just about myself. That's why it's an and, my own exploration and helping as many people as possible. So it really stuck to me. Even though I'm a student from Ramakrishna Ashram, I had read those statements, but it had never struck me that deep until 13 years back. So the second part, managing outside. The first part is mastering inside. If you look at our mindful leadership program, we kind of address that as a basis for being mindful and doing mindful. And if you take that path deeper, you will come to these stages actually. This mastering inside is really transcending this body-mind limitation and experiencing the vastness of us. And this is the steps for those. I will leave you to read this when I send this presentation. In fact, if you look at this yama, which is the first steps, and in that the first two sub-steps, ahimsa satya, Mahatma Gandhi just used these two to mobilize millions of people. If you look at, you can imagine the power of this. And there are 8 steps to reach to dhyana is the 7th step, meditation. That means all these other previous steps, create conditions for us to be in meditative state. And then samadhi is actually where we experience the oneness of the entire existence. There is no duality, there is just one. And Patanjali defines yoga as the purpose of yoga is chitta vritti nirodha. That means reducing the wandering nature of mind. So that's why the more you meditate and become calm, you reduce this wandering nature, then you can perceive something beyond the mind. Otherwise, it's like in a lake. If you notice, if lake is very perturbed with a lot of waves on the top, you can't see anything below, right? You will get cluttered images on the top. On the other hand, if the lake is very calm and still, you will see pearls at the bottom of the lake. It is something like that. If the mind is calm and chitta vritti nirodha, then we can see something beyond the mind. That's what the yoga helps to achieve in a spiritual way. There are many methods you can use. These are some things I have explored and I found them very useful. Happiness Program by Art of Living, because they are very integrated approaches of yoga, pranayama, meditation, mudra, sound, all those technologies combined in good ways. Inner Engineering by Isha Yoga, Kriya Yoga from Satsang Foundation, which is from Sri M. And this is another wonderful book to read, Himalayan Masters, Apprentice to Himalayan Masters by Sri M. His life experiences as a yogi. And this is one step where we see we are not the body, we are not the mind, we are something more. But that's first step actually in spirituality. The second step is non-dual. That means first step has duality. That means I and the world, or I and rest of my body and mind, etc. That means there is a dual. But Indian spiritual system takes you to go one more step where it says there is nothing else. There is only one. Existence is just one. It appears to be many. And that's what the Upanishads actually teach. In fact, they are the highest science of ultimate truth, because once you know there is only one, there cannot be anything more to know, right? Something more to know comes if there is something other than this one. That means you are the knowledge, you are the existence. It's like that actually. And Upanishad, the fundamental thing is shift from object to subject. Shift from what is it to who am I. See, in science, we are focused on outside. What is it? What is inside this object? What is beyond this universe? We are looking outward. Whereas Upanishads are talking about you go inward and look at who am I? Who is observing this? Who is asking this question? What is it? What is it? Because answer is there. You know, in fact, some of the scientists have come close to this. For example, Heisenberg uncertainty principle talks about the observation itself gets affected by the observer. So observer becomes more important than just what is being observed. And through that, they establish universal oneness as an experience, not as a concept or a theory or a value. And I would recommend to watch you some of these videos. This is Swami Sarvapriyananda. He's from Ramakrishna Ashram, New York. Very profound speaker. And here, 2 talks he gave in IIT Kanpur on Kena Upanishads, which actually asks about what is propelling this system? Who am I kind of questions. Mandukya Upanishad, another one, looks at states of consciousness. So very briefly on this Mandukya Upanishad, it talks about analyzing the states of our mind, our awakeness. So there is during wake state, our sensors, everything is outward projected. During dream state, it's inward projected. So our external senses are shut down. But internally, it keeps playing back. Our data, our software is still running, right? We get dreams. But in deep sleep, there is nothing. No world, right? No body, no mind, no world, nothing. In fact, that is our true state. Only thing is we are not aware in that. So if you are aware in deep sleep, you will be enlightened actually. That's what Upanishad, Mandukya Upanishad talks about. And that is called 4th state, it's called Turiya. And that is real consciousness. In fact, we are experiencing our existence beyond this virtual reality during deep sleep, but we are not aware of that. So doing that in an aware way is actually enlightenment. Then we know we are not just this body and mind, we are this one existence. It's called Sat Chit Anand. That means existence, consciousness, bliss. That's the term used to express it. Again, Shankara is a great ideas on this, Advaita Vedanta. Nirvana Shatakam, if you listen, you will understand many of those things. Again, I have given 2 talks by Sarvapriyananda. Drigdrishya Viveka is about seen and the seer. Who is seen, and goes deeper into exploring that. Last but one slide. If you want to read just one book, not so many things, I would recommend just this book. I talked about Suresh Ramaswamy, and he has written this book. This has gist of all wisdom traditions without any jargons, and in a very modern context, and with his personal experience, and extremely good for dealing with day-to-day personal, professional, social aspects, from that to highest spiritual possibilities, and lot of practical techniques and tips. So profound book to read. My last slide. So are we talking all about this for this ultimate thing only? What about now and today? Or my job, my family? Does it help in any way? Again, my personal experience is that there are a lot of these byproducts on this journey. We get better clarity and larger purpose in life. I'm listing all these things based on my personal experience actually. Less perturbed by external situations, more balanced and equanimous. In fact, it's so important, especially in the VUCA world, right? Where it's so volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. We need more to be balanced, otherwise we make wrong choices. Reduced fear, anxiety, worries, greed, anger, depression, boredom. I can, where I was versus where I am now in my journey, if I look back, I couldn't have sat for a long time. I used to get bored. Now there is no boredom because there is something joy inside. It is more like unconditional joy or love. It is not dependent on outside. It is more very inside actually, and it's more continuous. It doesn't fluctuate that much, and even if it goes down, very quickly comes back actually. Mean time to recovery, MTTR. So improved physical, mental, emotional well-being. We have seen in the first module that 80 to 90% diseases are psychosomatic, caused because of mind. The moment mind settles down, actually physical health improves. I think I might have shared in the previous sessions. For last 20 years, I haven't taken any medicine. I haven't gone to a doctor other than some dental treatment. In fact, my eyesight has changed. I used to wear bifocal glasses. Almost last 12 years, I'm not wearing any glasses. So a lot of changes happen because it works from inside out. As the, Anita Murjani mentioned about how she recovered from such a cancer just by internal change. These are all possibilities. Feeling lighter, liberated, less bonding actually. And with this, more effective in whatever we do in the outside, because we'll be more present and using all the intelligences, not just the intellect, which is processing data, and many more like this actually. So I personally feel it's so profound and so useful. That's why I just want to share with as many people as possible. So with that, I will conclude this. So I would request you, or rather submit to you or suggest to you to explore, experiment, and experience by yourself, going beyond this. And there are methods and techniques which are proven, which works, and there are a lot of resources available to do that. So with that, let me stop sharing, and I can take some questions. If people can come on video, that will be good. We can see faces. Of course, it's a choice.
Hi, Vishu. Thank you so much. As always, this was really great. I mean, looking at your face itself is such a calming effect. It feels as if, everything is so nice, pleasant, and quiet about the world. So
no, don't believe it. Don't believe it so much. Maybe you should check with my wife.
Thanks so much. And there are so many resources that you share. So one question I have, Vishu, is like, if I want to start on the practice of meditation, I'm trying quite hard. You know that, right? We've been in touch with each other. So how do we start that practice of meditation? What do we really do? I mean, when you sit with yourself for 10 minutes, how to get into that thoughtless state? Are there any tips or any sources?
Don't try to get into thoughtless state, because that itself is a thought.
Okay.
Then you will get caught into that loop. Observing breath is the simplest way. Just keep observing breath and start noticing small things. How the feeling in the nostrils, the feeling in the chest and the abdomen, how it moves. Even slight temperature changes in the nostrils as you breathe. Just start focusing on that, and thoughts will come, they wander around. Then you just notice and bring it back. Don't criticize yourself. Oh, I'm getting distracted, because that's another thought. You will get into the trap. Just this simple practice itself is a great meditation. In fact, in Vipassana, it's just that.
Okay. Anapana.
Yeah. And there are a few more pranayamas, etc., which help. Of course, as you saw in the Ashtanga Yoga, we cannot control mind just by doing this. That's why there are 8 steps. Meditation is the 7th step actually.
Yeah.
But you can start with that. In fact, what we eat, how our lifestyle is, when we sleep and when we wake up, all those things have effect on our body and mind. So that's why Ashtanga Yoga is very good, because it brings everything together to create a condition where mind goes to meditative state.
Yeah.
That is one. And otherwise, those three, what I have explored, you can explore that. And I can also do one teaching session in this session, which is a 20-minute meditation, which is a 4-step meditation. Actually, some of my teachers have, allowed me to teach some of those things. And
that will really help if you can do that.
Yeah, that takes daily 20 minutes practice, and it's very profound actually.
Okay, if you can really help us with that, that will really be nice. Thank you.
Sure, you can explore that. Thank you.
Sir, thank you so much for this session. How does this karma connect to this? Is there something that we have to know and then do, or that's a big thing that I always get confused with?
Yeah. In fact, Sadhguru has spoken very nicely. He gives a very logical way of looking at things. See, karma is essentially memory. See, I showed you how life happens in a yogic system understanding. That is, there is a genetic inheritance which has certain memory, right? Because that's how one cell produces into this such complex human body, right? That is, it has so much of memory in that, just like a seed becomes a tree. So there is one set of memory coming in that. Another set of memory comes through soul. Soul is nothing but that subtle body, which is, I showed you in the Panchakoshas. The combination of together makes one individual human being. That means we have a lot of those data in us. That is called karma actually. And whatever we do new also creates more data. All what we perceive through the 5 sensors gets stored, creates impression in all those 5 layers, not just in the body and mind. And what we think also creates more data. So we keep on creating karma in a sense all the time. And it gets codified into our genes and propagates into next generation. That's how the inheritance happens. That's why you can see people, generations who have gone through trauma, next generations suffer with many mental issues, skin diseases. In fact, in homeopathy, they look at up to 7 generations, which can actually propagate like that. They might not have gone through the trauma, but they will inherit that. So karma means we have something, but we have ability to disconnect that. That is the greatest power we have actually. That's why I said, if you just unmask this virtual reality, we are disconnecting from that karma.
Okay.
And these are the methods available to unmask that.
So we can change the destined path that they call as this life is already predefined or destined, and whatever as per your karma will come to you, whether you try or not will come. That we can change is what?
That's a very complex subject. See, if you don't do anything, it propagates in the way it goes. That's why Jyotish Shastra, for example, predicts based on that. And they say people are on yogic path, they can't predict because they can change their course. So if you don't do anything, it unwinds the same way. That's why I say just karma. But human beings have a consciousness. I can make a choice. For example, I can say karma and I can just lie down on the bed, or I can say, let me get up and go and do something. So I have a choice. So karma has something, but we have a choice which we can override that actually. That's
Thank you, sir.
That's the power we have actually.
Thank you.
Good morning. Okay. I have one question. Basically, when we do meditation, it is good, but I don't get the motivation to meditate. So how do we create interest in doing meditation? Okay. Just wanted to understand.
Good question. Good question. It's not at all easy. I mean, this path is not easy. That's why it's a premium path. That's why it's not majority.
Because meditation needs a goal.
It doesn't need a goal. It needs an intention. And in Indian system, they call sankalpa. The more stronger you say that I want to experience myself beyond this. So initially it starts with like an assumption, because now what I showed you today is just a knowledge. It's not a practice. And unless you experience, you won't trust that. And there is no substitute for experience. So what Allah showed you to create you interest and create you more motivation, that there is something more than what we feel we are, and I should pursue that. But unless you experience that, you won't see it, and you won't get conviction, you won't get motivated to do that. So you have to start with small baby steps. Do that, keep observing, you will start noticing some changes. As I said, meditation alone, you can't do. If you have to change probably your lifestyle, food habits, because food has a very big impact on mind, you can experiment that. You eat very heavy, spicy food one night and observe how you feel next morning, early morning. How you feel in your body, how you feel in your mind. You feel calm or agitated or restless. You can clearly start noticing. So if you eat, for example, at night, more of fruits and vegetables and that kind of diet, you observe next morning how you feel. It will be easy to meditate actually. So that's why Ashtanga Yoga has all those steps to prepare the system to be more going to meditative state. That's why some of those programs are powerful, because they combine all those things together. And if you notice all those things, Art of Living, Isha Yoga or Shriyans, they start with the gross body activities like the asanas, then they go to pranayam, then they go to chanting or vibrations, sound, then meditation. So it goes from gross to subtle. Directly going to subtle is challenge.
So we should just announce the meditation workshop right now.
We'll do that. We'll get people's.
I'm just joking.
Yeah. I think it's very important to experience. Otherwise, we'll intellectualize all these things, which is again gathering more data. You know, whole idea is to disconnect the data.
Okay.
Good morning, Vishu. This is Raj here. Can you hear me?
Hi, Raj. Yes.
Hi, I'm connecting to you after a very long time, but I don't have any questions. Great presentation. Just wanted to share with you that, after we met and that one wonderful day along with Dattu and his, son. I don't know if you remember the question that I asked Sri M, and that changed a lot of things for me. For example, let me just, tell you what I had asked him. So when we went for that book signing after he had returned from
Raj, just if it's very personal, we can take it offline. But if it's generic for everybody, you can ask that.
Yes. Saying, how the journey happens very quickly. What I wanted to say was, one question which I asked him was, can you give me a whack on the back in such a way that whatever is not supposed to be inside of me should not be there. And you know that, after 3 days after I returned from there, I had a muscle spasm and a lot of things happened. I won't go into the details of that. So I was literally advised by doctors not to move out of my home for months together. So 1 full year, I was kind of first 3 months lying totally in bed. And then, I'm very careful now that, what you ask for, you do get it. But it's been an awesome journey, and I would like to reconnect. I don't have your number, so once you are offline, I'll put it on the chat. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Vishu, this is Mahesh.
Hi, Mahesh.
Nice hearing you after a long time.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a good refresher. Working from home in the corporate, right? It's a good refresher. Just one thought and more of a query also. Like you mentioned about the goal with 4 different paths, right? Like Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and all. So
they are generic path, but there is a combination of many things. For example, there are more than 100 Upanishads, and all of them point to the same goal through different ways people can approach. Because each of us are very unique, and each of our paths are unique. So we should explore that way. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Sure. So there were many examples of some of them following only one path and achieving the goal. Like
yes.
So these techniques, whatever you just mentioned, like inner engineering or happiness program, is this a combination of these four, or is it like it balances out these four methods towards that?
They combine all the things actually. If you attend their programs, there is a lot of bhajans, bhakti, there is a lot of sadhana, there is a lot of knowledge sessions, jnana yoga. So all this is combined because ultimately all these paths converge to the same thing. In fact, that is the beauty of Indian system. That's why it's a very plural system. There is no one book, there is no one God, there is no one path. It recognizes that everybody has their own unique path and they should explore that. And there is enough guidance too from other people.
Thanks, Vishu.
Hi, Vishu. Bhaskar here. Thanks for the wonderful session. I just have one question. For someone who has started meditation just recently, what do you suggest? Do you want them to, suggest them to go to, guided meditation sessions, or it is something that one should explore on his own? So, what do you suggest for somebody who has started just now?
You just start with whatever meditation you have started, because you will start getting guidance. This system is so wonderful because it's really inside. There is nothing much outside. The moment we start turning inside, we'll start getting guidance from within. So you start following your intuition actually. Only thing is you kind of observe within yourself.
Okay, so like there are a lot of apps like Headspace and Calm, and there are the different apps who provide guided meditation.
Yeah.
So is it better to explore on your own then, right?
They are good starting point, but anything you depend on outside, you will become dependent on that, right? So you should be able to meditate by yourself rather than having a gadget. It's like when your leg is not in proper shape, you may need a stretcher. But when it becomes right, if you still have the stretcher, it's a drag on yourself.
Yeah, understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Vishu, Datta here.
Hey, hi, Datta.
Hi. Hey, Vishu, fantastic presentation. Just want to check with you, is there something, if it is shareable, maybe one of your spiritual experience, of course we saw videos of out of body and those things, but anything which is shareable to this audience from your own perspective?
My own experience, you mean?
Yeah.
Maybe not this time.
Yeah, sure. No,
after people have some experience, it's more, they may connect a little bit better. Otherwise, it may sound like esoteric.
Yeah, we want people to come to the next session also. So.
No, that's not a marketing thing.
So I have a question. You talked you just mentioned that meditation somewhere is step 7. So there are these steps that you spoke about. Can you once again refresh on that, please?
Anyway, I'll be sharing this presentation. You can look at that. They are called yama, which is more of a social rules. That means like satya, ahimsa, how you should behave in the society kind of thing. Niyama, which is your own discipline, keeping clean body and mind, like that. Swachha, shaukya, like that. Yama, niyama. Then asana, which is postures. Then pranayama, which is actually, it's not a breath control, it's actually prana control. We use breath to do that because there is a connection. Then something called pratyahara, which is turning the senses inward. That means I should be able to quickly switch between any distractions, desires, attachments, attractions, that aspect. Then dharana. Dharana means I'm able to focus one-pointed attention on anything. Then dhyana, which is meditation. Then samadhi. Anyway, that one slide which I showed you has good information, so you can take a look at that.
Hey, Vishnu, one question. The lot of negativity, watching news and all, puts a lot of pressure on us, right?
Yes.
Do you have any guideline, like how we can keep ourselves calm, not to fear about this? And I don't know how this will end, when it will end, and all, because of all the impacts we see. Any tips how we can manage and come out of this safely?
I would say first we should become aware that just like junk food is very bad for body, junk information is equally bad for mind, because that's the food for mind actually. And the mind has a big impact on body. In fact, if you reduce watching news and reading newspapers, world is actually very fine. Try that. Because world around us, just around us, there is not much problem. We look at entire globe, and somewhere some negative happened, it gets amplified. We think whole world has gone wrong, and actually then inside goes wrong actually. First becoming aware of this, that we are feeding a lot of junk into the mind, and we have a choice. Consciously we choose what to watch, what not to watch, what to read, what not to read.
That's right.
Yeah, that is one step. Another step is, even if you watch that, you be conscious that you are beyond all these things. But that's a little bigger step. We saw today that this is a virtual reality, right? This is not real actually. But we won't get convinced so easily, because we are so much attached or trapped into that. But just recalling that, saying that this is all not real actually, I am much more than this. That itself, reminder itself, keeps you bringing out of that actually.
Okay. Sure.
I wish you Ravi Kumar. Good morning.
Yeah, I think in interest of time, I am okay for 5 more minutes. If anybody's, we can log off. Officially the program is over, but I'm okay for another 5 minutes. We can go ahead.
Yeah, wish you good morning. Ravi Kumar this side. As usual, it's a great session. And only thing I would like to look forward for your practical sessions. I think we can learn by doing. I think that's what I believe in. So doing is what I'm really looking forward from you. Anytime, please, you could actually start that. I love those some of the offsite sessions that you have. We all had some time during these 10 days. I really love those sessions, and they're really great. And maybe once we can also look at meeting and in some common places, and rest of the time we can also do sessions on this using technology.
Yeah.
So looking forward to the practical sessions, Vishu.
Sure.
Thank you.
Morning, Vishu. I have a question.
Hi, Kangal. Yeah.
This is about following a strict regimen. You see, many a times we are not able to do it at the same time or very systematically. And it kind of creates a guilt in us that we are not doing it systematically. We are not doing it in a proper regimen and so on. How important is this?
I feel it's very important, because body and mind, everything has a rhythm. You might have heard about circadian rhythm in the modern science. And it is connected to the whole lunar and moon cycles and earth cycles, all those things. Because we are not a very independent entity, we are part of this nature. And the more we are aligned with that rhythm, that much more it will be smooth. That's why morning time is very useful for all of these kind of activities. Just before sunset, that's why the Sandhya Kalas, morning and evening, that twilight zones, they are most significant, most effective, because there is certain kind of a energy system which helps in this. And sticking to that rhythm actually then keeps this evolution faster, and we will see more of the result, and then we'll get more motivated. So in fact, there are again modern science through neuroscience, what's called neuroplasticity. So if you regularly do something for 42 days, it gets codified. That means neural pathways get established. It becomes like an habit. So it's very important, any practice you continuously do for 42 days at least, without a break, every day at the same time. Then actually it becomes easy. So in a sense, this should be first priority. Everything other things will shape around that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, I think good amount of time. Thank you all very much, and a lot of interest. It motivates as well for doing sessions. And thanks for your participation and questions and interactions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.